The morning fog hung thick over the Gloucestershire countryside as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell received the call that would change everything. Her phone buzzed at precisely 6:47 a.m., interrupting her quiet cup of tea. The voice on the other end belonged to Chief Inspector Robert Hayes, and his tone carried an urgency she had rarely heard in their 20-year working relationship. "Sarah, I need you at the palace immediately. We have a situation involving the Queen Consort's household staff and some missing items from Her late Majesty's personal collection." Detective Inspector Mitchell had worked on many high-profile cases throughout her career with the Metropolitan Police's Special Protection Unit, but nothing quite prepared her for what she would discover over the next several weeks. As she drove through the early morning traffic toward Buckingham Palace, she couldn't shake the feeling that this case would test every skill she had developed during her years investigating crimes involving the royal family. Upon arriving at the palace, Mitchell was escorted through a series of corridors she had never seen before, despite her years of security clearance. The paintings lining the walls seemed to watch her every step, their subjects frozen in poses of regal authority. She was led to a small conference room where Chief Inspector Hayes waited alongside Sir Edmund Rothwell, the palace's head of security, and Lady Catherine Pembroke, the Queen Consort's private secretary. Sir Edmund, a man whose bearing suggested decades of military service, spread several photographs across the mahogany table. Each image showed exquisite pieces of jewelry, ornate silver serving sets, and delicate porcelain figurines. These were not just valuable antiques. They were pieces of history that had belonged personally to Queen Elizabeth II. Items that held sentimental value far beyond their monetary worth. These items were discovered missing during the routine inventory following Her late Majesty's passing, Lady Catherine explained, her voice carefully controlled. "Initially, we assumed they had simply been misplaced during the transition of personal effects. However, our investigation has revealed a disturbing pattern." Mitchell studied the photographs carefully. A diamond brooch that had been a wedding gift from Prince Philip, a set of pearl earrings worn during the coronation ceremony, a small silver photograph frame that had sat on the Queen's private desk for decades. Each piece told a story of a life lived in service to the Crown and the British people. Chief Inspector Hayes leaned forward, his expression grave. "We have reason to believe that several members of the household staff at Highgrove House and other royal residences may have been systematically removing these items over a period of months, possibly years. The trail has led us to focus our investigation on activities surrounding the Queen Consort's primary residence." The investigation had actually begun 3 months earlier when an eagle-eyed curator at the Royal Collection Trust noticed inconsistencies in the inventory records. Dr. Margaret Thornton, a woman who had spent her entire career cataloging royal artifacts, had been conducting the routine post-mortem inventory when she discovered that several items listed in Queen Elizabeth II's personal effects were simply not where they were supposed to. Dr. Thornton's meticulous nature had served the royal family well over the years. She approached her work with the precision of a scientist and the reverence of a historian. When she first noticed the discrepancies, she double-checked her records, consulted with other curators, and even reviewed security footage before raising the alarm. The missing items weren't random. They were pieces that could easily be concealed and transported, yet valuable enough to attract serious collectors in the black market for royal memorabilia. The initial investigation had been conducted quietly within the royal household. Sir Edmund Rothwell had personally overseen the security review, working closely with a small team of trusted investigators. They had interviewed dozens of staff members, reviewed access logs, and examined security protocols. The evidence slowly began to point toward a sophisticated operation that had been carefully planned and executed over an extended period. Detective Inspector Mitchell learned that the investigation had taken a dramatic turn just 1 week prior to her involvement. A confidential informant had contacted the palace security team with information about items matching the description of the missing heirlooms being offered for sale through private collectors in London's exclusive antique districts. The informant, whose identity remained protected, claimed to have knowledge of a network that specialized in acquiring and selling items with royal provenance. The informant's tip had led investigators to a small, prestigious auction house in Mayfair, where several suspicious transactions had taken place over the past 18 months. The auction house, Pemberton and Associates, had a reputation for handling high-end estate sales and private collections. Their client lists included wealthy collectors from around the world, who were willing to pay premium prices for items with historical significance. When investigators approached Pemberton and Associates, they discovered that the auction house had been unknowingly handling several items that matched the descriptions of the missing royal heirlooms. The items had been consigned by what appeared to be legitimate sellers, complete with seemingly authentic provenance documentation. However, closer examination revealed sophisticated forgeries in the paperwork trail. As Detective Inspector Mitchell absorbed this information, she realized the complexity of what lay ahead. This wasn't a simple case of opportunistic theft by a disgruntled employee. The evidence suggested a well-organized operation that involved multiple individuals, careful planning, and connections to the legitimate art and antique trade. The perpetrators had clearly understood both the security systems they were circumventing and the market they were selling into. Sir Edmund produced another set of documents, these containing staff records and security clearance information. We've narrowed our focus to a group of individuals who had regular access to the private quarters where these items were kept. The pattern of missing items corresponds with duty rotations and access schedules for specific staff members, Lady Catherine added. What makes this particularly troubling is that these individuals were trusted members of the household staff, some with years of faithful service. The betrayal of that trust is almost as devastating as the loss of the items themselves. The investigation had revealed that the missing items had been taken from several royal residences, but the pattern suggested that the primary point of access was through the Queen Consort's household staff. This was particularly sensitive because it implied that individuals with direct access to the royal family's most private spaces had violated their positions of trust. Mitchell studied the staff records, noting the careful background checks and security clearances that each individual had undergone. Before being granted access to the royal residences, the vetting process was rigorous, involving comprehensive background investigations, character references, and ongoing security monitoring. Yet somehow, this system had been compromised from within. The detective's experience told her that cases like this often involve multiple layers of complexity. The individuals directly responsible for taking the items were likely part of a larger network that included people with expertise in documentation forgery, connections to private collectors, and knowledge of international markets for stolen art and antiques. Understanding this network would be crucial to recovering the missing heirlooms and ensuring that justice was served. As the briefing continued, Mitchell learned about the specific security measures that protected royal residences and the personal effects of family members. The system involved multiple layers of physical security, electronic monitoring, and human oversight. The fact that items had been removed without triggering these systems suggested either sophisticated knowledge of the security protocols or possible inside assistance from individuals with authorized access. The Queen Consort's residence had been a particular focus of the investigation because several of the missing items had last been documented there during official functions. In private gatherings, the residence maintained its own household staff, separate from the main palace staff, which created additional layers of complexity in tracking access and movements. Chief Inspector Hayes emphasized the sensitivity of the investigation. We must proceed with absolute discretion. Any leak of information could compromise the investigation and cause significant embarrassment to the royal family. At the same time, we cannot allow those responsible to escape justice or to continue their activities. Detective Inspector Mitchell understood the delicate balance required. The investigation needed to be thorough and professional while maintaining the confidentiality that protected both the integrity of the case and the reputation of the royal family. She would need to work closely with palace security while also maintaining the independence necessary for an effective police investigation. The meeting concluded with assignments for the Next phase of the investigation, Mitchell would lead a small team of specialized investigators in conducting a comprehensive review of all evidence collected to date. They would also begin the process of obtaining warrants for searches of properties connected to the suspected individuals. As she left the palace that morning, Detective Inspector Mitchell reflected on the weight of responsibility she now carried. The missing heirlooms represented more than valuable objects. They were tangible connections to British history and the legacy of a beloved monarch. Recovering them would require not just investigative skill, but also a deep understanding of the complex world surrounding the royal family and the individuals who served them. 3 weeks after the initial briefing, Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell found herself standing in the rain outside a modest cottage in the Cotswolds, watching as her team prepared to execute the first major search warrant of the investigation. The cottage belonged to Margaret Thompson, a former housekeeper who had worked in the Queen Consort's household for nearly 15 years before. Retiring 6 months earlier, the investigation had taken several unexpected turns since that first morning at the palace. What had initially appeared to be a straightforward case of missing items had evolved into something far more complex and troubling. The evidence trail had led Mitchell's team through a network of relationships and transactions that stretched across England and into continental Europe. Margaret Thompson had not been on the original list of suspects. Her name had emerged during interviews with current household staff, who mentioned her close relationships with several individuals who remained under investigation. Thompson had been well regarded during her tenure, known for her attention to detail and her discretion in handling the royal family's private affairs. Her retirement had been voluntary, and she had received glowing references from her supervisors. However, financial analysis had revealed troubling discrepancies in Thompson's personal accounts. Despite her modest salary as a housekeeper, she had made several large purchases and investments over the past 2 years that seemed inconsistent with her known income sources. Bank records showed deposits of cash in amounts that raised red flags with financial investigators. As Mitchell approached the cottage, she was struck by its well-maintained appearance. The garden was immaculate. The expensive plantings and professional landscaping that seemed beyond the means of a retired housekeeper. A new Range Rover sat in the driveway, its registration showing it had been purchased just 8 months earlier. The search warrant was comprehensive, allowing investigators to examine all areas of the property and to seize any items that might be connected to the missing royal heirlooms. Mitchell had assembled a team that included specialists in art authentication, digital forensics, and document analysis. They would need to be thorough but respectful. Recognizing that Thompson might prove to be innocent of any wrongdoing, Detective Sergeant James Crawford, Mitchell's most experienced investigator, led the team that would search the cottage interior. Crawford had worked on several high-profile art, theft cases, and had a keen eye for spotting items that might be significant to the investigation. His preliminary examination of the cottage revealed furnishings and decorative items that appeared to be of unusually high quality for the residence of a retired domestic worker. In the main sitting room, Crawford discovered a collection of silver serving pieces displayed in a glass cabinet. While these items didn't match the specific descriptions of the missing royal heirlooms, their style and craftsmanship suggested they were of significant value. Each piece was carefully photographed and documented for further investigation. Meanwhile, Detective Constable Lisa Park focused on Thompson's home office, a small room that had been converted from what was originally a bedroom. Park was a specialist in digital forensics, and her examination of Thompson's computer and personal papers revealed a complex web of communications and financial transactions that painted a disturbing picture. Thompson's computer contained dozens of emails exchanged with individuals whose names appeared in connection with high-end auction houses and private collectors. The communications were carefully worded, avoiding direct references to specific items or transactions. But the pattern suggested coordination of sales activities over an extended period. Several email addresses were traced to accounts registered under false names or through anonymized services. More damaging were the financial records found in Thompson's filing system. These documents showed a methodical approach to converting valuable items into cash through a series of intermediaries. Bank statements revealed regular deposits that corresponded with dates when Thompson had been working at royal residences. The amounts were substantial, but not so large as to immediately trigger banking oversight in Thompson's bedroom. Investigators made their most significant discovery of the day. Hidden behind a false panel in the wardrobe, Detective Sergeant Crawford found a small collection of items that immediately caught his attention. Among these was a delicate porcelain figurine that matched exactly the description of one of the missing pieces from Queen Elizabeth II's personal collection. The figurine was a Meissen shepherdess that had been a gift to the Queen from the German president during a state visit in the 1970s. It was one of several small decorative items that had been displayed in the Queen's private sitting room at Windsor Castle. The piece was not only valuable in monetary terms, but held special significance because of its diplomatic history. Crawford carefully photographed the figurine in place before securing it as evidence. The discovery was immediately communicated to Detective Inspector Mitchell, who recognized its significance to the broader investigation. This was the first direct physical evidence linking a suspect to the missing royal heirlooms. The search of Thompson's property continued for several hours, yielding additional items of interest. In the garage, investigators found professional packaging materials and shipping supplies that seemed excessive for personal use. There were boxes of bubble wrap, custom foam padding, and shipping labels from multiple courier services. This suggested involvement in regular shipping of fragile items, potentially to buyers located far from Thompson's residence. A notebook found in Thompson's kitchen contained handwritten entries that appeared to be inventory lists with coded descriptions. The entries included dates, abbreviated descriptions, and numerical values that investigators believed represented sale prices. The handwriting matched samples of Thompson's writing found elsewhere in the house, and the dates corresponded with periods when she had been working at royal residences. While the physical search was conducted, other members of Mitchell's team were investigating Thompson's associates and connections. Financial investigators had traced several of the mysterious deposits in Thompson's accounts too. Transfers from a company called Heritage Acquisitions Limited. Further investigation revealed that Heritage Acquisitions was a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands with no apparent legitimate business activities. The shell company's registration documents listed a London address that turned out to be a virtual office, service used by numerous companies seeking to obscure their actual operations. However, banking records obtained through international cooperation requests revealed that Heritage Acquisitions had been receiving funds from collectors and dealers across Europe and North America. Detective Inspector Mitchell began to see the outline of a sophisticated operation that went far beyond simple theft by household staff. The evidence suggested a network that included individuals with expertise in art authentication, international finance, and logistics. The missing royal heirlooms were likely just one part of a broader operation targeting high-value items from prestigious sources. The investigation into Heritage Acquisitions revealed connections to several other suspicious transactions involving items claimed to have royal or aristocratic provenance. Auction records showed that the company had been involved in sales of jewelry, artwork, and decorative items that commanded premium prices due to their alleged historical connections. One particularly disturbing discovery was evidence that forged documentation had been created to support the sale of items through legitimate auction houses. The forgeries were sophisticated, including fake letters of provenance, fabricated historical records, and counterfeit authentication certificates. This suggested involvement of individuals with detailed knowledge of how valuable items are authenticated and sold in legitimate markets. As the day's searches concluded, Detective Inspector Mitchell reviewed the evidence with her team. The discovery of the Meissen figurine at Thompson's residence was a breakthrough that would allow them to arrest her and potentially obtain her cooperation in identifying other members of the network. However, Mitchell was aware that Thompson was likely a relatively minor player in what appeared to be a much larger operation. The financial evidence suggested that Thompson's role had been primarily as a source of items rather than as an organizer of the broader network. Her modest lifestyle, despite the suspicious deposits, indicated that she was probably receiving a small percentage of the final sale prices of the items she provided. The real profits were likely flowing to individuals with connections to international collectors and sophisticated knowledge of the art market. Mitchell's team had also uncovered evidence pointing to potential involvement of other current and former royal household staff. Phone records showed regular communications between Thompson and several individuals who had access to various royal residences. These communications intensified around times when official events or private gatherings provided opportunities for access to areas where valuable items were displayed. The investigation was revealing a pattern of exploitation that went beyond simple opportunistic theft. The evidence suggested systematic targeting of specific items based on their value, portability, and the likelihood that their absence would go unnoticed for extended periods. This required detailed knowledge of royal household operations, security procedures, and the personal habits of family members. As evening approached, Detective Inspector Mitchell prepared for what would be one of the most sensitive aspects of the investigation. With sufficient evidence now in hand to justify arrests, she would need to coordinate with palace security to ensure that the apprehension of suspects didn't compromise ongoing royal activities or create security vulnerabilities. The arrest of Margaret Thompson and potentially other household staff members would send shockwaves through the royal household community. These individuals had been trusted with access to the most private aspects of the royal family's lives, and their betrayal of that trust would have implications far beyond the immediate criminal case. Mitchell also recognized that the investigation was far from complete. While they had identified some of the individuals involved in removing items from royal residences, the network of buyers, authenticators, and sellers remained largely intact. Disrupting this network would require international cooperation and coordination with law enforcement agencies in multiple countries. The detective spent her evening reviewing the evidence and preparing for the arrests that would take place the following morning. She knew that once arrests were made, the investigation would enter a new phase, focused on obtaining cooperation from suspects and tracing the full extent of the network's activities. The recovery of the missing royal heirlooms would depend on their ability to identify and locate all the individuals involved in this sophisticated operation. The Dawn operation unfolded with military precision across 3 counties as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell coordinated the largest royal security operation in decades. At exactly 6 a.m. on a crisp October morning, synchronized raids began at 7 different locations. From Margaret Thompson's Cotswolds cottage to a luxury apartment in Belgravia that served as the operational headquarters for the Heritage Acquisitions Network. Mitchell positioned herself at the command center established in a mobile unit outside the Queen Consort's Gloucestershire estate, where the most critical phase of the operation would take place. Intelligence gathered over the past month had revealed that the estate's head groundskeeper, David Whitmore, had been using his position to facilitate access for Thompson and others to areas of the property where valuable items were temporarily stored during events and renovations. Whitmore had worked on the estate for over 20 years, gradually earning trust that allowed him unrestricted access to most areas of the property. His position required him to coordinate with household staff during official functions, providing him with detailed knowledge of when valuable items would be moved or displayed. This intelligence had been crucial to the theft operation's success over such an extended period. The raid on the estate required extraordinary discretion, as the Queen Consort was in residence at the time. Royal protection officers had worked throughout the night to ensure that the operation could proceed without disturbing Her Majesty or compromising her security. A cover story involving routine security maintenance provided justification for the unusual activity around the estate grounds as Mitchell's team approached Whitmore's quarters in the estate's staff housing complex. They could see lights already burning in his windows. Intelligence suggested that he was preparing for an early morning departure, possibly alerted by news of Thompson's arrest the previous evening. The timing of the coordinated raids had been carefully calculated to prevent suspects from warning each other. or destroying evidence. Detective Sergeant James Crawford led the entry team into Whitmore's residence. The groundskeeper's apartment was modestly furnished, but investigators immediately noticed several high-end electronics and expensive clothing that seemed inconsistent with his salary. More significantly, they discovered a sophisticated communications setup including encrypted phones and secure internet connections that were far beyond what would be expected for his legitimate duties. In Whitmore's bedroom, investigators found a detailed map of the estate with handwritten notations marking service entrances, security camera blind spots, and storage areas where items were temporarily kept during renovations. The map also included timing information about staff rotations and security patrols, creating a comprehensive guide for anyone seeking unauthorized access to sensitive areas of the property. Whitmore himself was found attempting to destroy documents in his fireplace when officers entered the residence. The partially burned papers included what appeared to be lists of items with descriptions and estimated values. Digital forensics specialists were later able to reconstruct much of this information, revealing a catalog of potential targets that included items from multiple royal residences. Meanwhile, at the Belgravia apartment that served as the operations nerve center, Detective Constable Lisa Park was uncovering the sophisticated infrastructure that had supported the theft and resale network. The apartment was registered to a company called Meridian Cultural Services, which purported to provide consulting services to collectors and museums seeking to authenticate and acquire items with historical provenance. The apartment's main room had been converted into a professional photography studio equipped with high-end cameras and lighting equipment designed to capture detailed images of artwork and decorative items. Investigators found hundreds of photographs of items that matched descriptions of pieces missing from various royal residences and other prestigious collections. Each photograph was accompanied by detailed condition reports and estimated market values. A computer server found in the apartment contained communications with buyers located across North America, Europe, and Asia. The messages revealed a sophisticated understanding of international art markets and collectors' preferences. Many of the buyers appeared to be legitimate collectors who had no knowledge that the items they were purchasing had been stolen. The operation had successfully infiltrated legitimate auction houses and private dealers to create apparently authentic provenance for stolen items. The most shocking discovery at the Belgravia location was a secure storage room containing dozens of valuable items that had not yet been sold. Among these were several pieces from Queen Elizabeth II's personal collection, including a pair of diamond earrings that had been wedding gifts from foreign dignitaries and a small collection of rare books with personal inscriptions from the Queen's private library. The books were particularly significant because they represented a more systematic violation of the royal family's privacy than the theft of decorative items. These volumes contained personal notes and bookmarks that provided intimate glimpses into the late Queen's reading habits and intellectual interests. Their theft represented a profound violation of personal space that went beyond mere monetary loss. As the raids continued throughout the morning, a clear picture emerged of an operation that had been active for nearly 3 years. Financial investigators traced over £2.3 million in transactions connected to the sale of stolen royal items, with the network having successfully placed pieces in private collections around the world. The sophisticated nature of the operation had allowed it to operate undetected for an extended period. The investigation revealed that the network had specifically targeted items that would be difficult to trace and unlikely to be immediately missed. Rather than attempting to steal famous pieces that would be quickly noticed, they had focused on items from private quarters and storage areas where inventory was less frequently checked. This strategy had allowed them to accumulate a substantial collection of valuable pieces without triggering security alerts. At Thompson's cottage, investigators found detailed notes that revealed the extent of planning that had gone into each theft. The notes included information about the royal family's personal schedules, the timing of official events that might provide access opportunities, and assessments of the security risks associated with taking specific items. The level of detail suggested that multiple individuals within the royal household had been providing information. To support the operation, the arrest of David Whitmore proved to be a crucial breakthrough in understanding how the network had operated. Under questioning, Whitmore revealed that he had been recruited by a London-based art dealer named Marcus Pemberton, who had connections to several legitimate auction houses and private dealers. Pemberton had presented the opportunity as a way to help preserve important historical items by placing them with collectors who would appreciate their significance. Whitmore's cooperation led investigators to Marcus Pemberton, a charming and well-educated individual who had used his legitimate connections in the art world to create a sophisticated laundering operation for stolen items. Pemberton operated from a prestigious gallery in Mayfair, had built a reputation as a specialist in items with royal and aristocratic provenance. His clientele included wealthy collectors who were willing to pay premium prices for pieces with such distinguished histories. The investigation of Pemberton's gallery revealed the sophisticated methods used to create false provenance for stolen items. The gallery employed several individuals with expertise in historical research, created elaborate but fictional histories for pieces that entered their inventory. These fabricated stories were supported by forged documents, fake photographs, and counterfeit authentication certificates that were virtually indistinguishable from legitimate materials. Pemberton had also cultivated relationships with several auction houses that specialized in high-end estate sales and historical items. These relationships allowed him to place stolen pieces in legitimate sales venues where they would be examined by experts who had no reason to suspect their true origins. The gallery's reputation for handling prestigious items provided cover for the introduction of stolen goods into legitimate markets. The international scope of the operation became apparent as investigators traced sales to collectors in the United States, Germany, Japan, and several other countries. Many of these buyers were legitimate collectors who had no knowledge of the item's true origins. The sophisticated documentation provided by Pemberton's network had convinced even experienced collectors and auction house experts of the item's authenticity. Recovery efforts began immediately, as investigators worked with international law enforcement partners to locate and retrieve stolen items. The process was complicated by the fact that many items had been sold to good faith purchasers, who would need to be compensated if their purchases were invalidated. Legal proceedings to recover the items would likely continue for several years. The operation's conclusion came with the simultaneous arrest of 12 individuals across England and the seizure of over 100 stolen items valued at more than £8 million. The recovered pieces included not only items from royal collections, but also valuable pieces stolen from other prestigious sources, including several National Trust properties and private estates of aristocratic families. For the royal family, the recovery of Queen Elizabeth II's personal items provided some closure to a deeply troubling chapter. The stolen pieces were more than valuable objects. They were tangible connections to the late Queen's life and memories. Their return allowed the royal collection to be properly preserved for future generations. The investigation also led to significant changes in security procedures at royal residences. New protocols were implemented for inventory management, staff vetting, and access control. The betrayal by trusted household staff members prompted a comprehensive review of employment practices and ongoing security monitoring. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell reflected on the case as she watched the final pieces of evidence being catalogued. The investigation had revealed the vulnerability of even the most prestigious institutions to sophisticated insider threats. The royal family's tradition of trusting household staff with intimate access to their private lives had been exploited by individuals who saw opportunity in that trust. The case also highlighted the international nature of high-end art crime and the sophistication of modern criminal networks. The theft and laundering operation had required expertise in multiple areas, including security analysis, art authentication, international finance, and logistics. The criminals had successfully exploited weaknesses in legitimate art markets to create apparently authentic provenance for stolen items. As the investigation concluded, Mitchell recognized that the recovery of the stolen items was only part of the story. The broader network of buyers, dealers, and facilitators would require ongoing investigation and international cooperation to fully dismantle. The case had revealed connections to other theft operations targeting prestigious collections around the world. The Queen Consort issued a statement, expressing gratitude for the professional conduct of the investigation and the recovery of the precious items. The statement also acknowledged the difficulty of balancing the royal family's desire for privacy with the security measures necessary to protect their historical legacy. The case had reminded everyone involved that preserving Britain's cultural heritage required constant vigilance against those who would exploit positions of trust for personal gain. The final chapter of the investigation would unfold in courtrooms across England as the suspects faced justice for their crimes. The complexity of the case would require expert testimony about art authentication, international law, and royal security procedures. The proceedings would serve as a reminder that even the most trusted individuals could succumb to the temptation of exploiting their positions for financial gain. For Detective Inspector Mitchell, the case represented both a professional triumph and a sobering reminder of the ongoing threats facing Britain's cultural institutions. The recovery of Queen Elizabeth II's personal effects had preserved important pieces of history, but the investigation had also revealed vulnerabilities that would require continued attention and resources to address.